Diverted Desires. Chapter 1. Gate 47. It was nearly midnight, the kind of hour when even airports start to feel like they've given up. Rows of empty chairs stretched toward flickering monitors. Rain danced across the tall windows like fingers dragging down fogged glass, and silence echoed louder than the occasional airport announcement. Everything felt suspended. Julian sat alone at Gate 47, fingers wrapped loosely around a half-empty glass of bourbon. He hadn't planned to be here. Then again, flight delays have a way of forcing people into moments they didn't expect. Moments without scripts. That's when he noticed her. She didn't try to draw attention. She didn't need to. She was seated a few rows away, one leg tucked under the other, wrapped in a soft sweater that slouched slightly off her shoulder. Her phone lay face down on the side table, untouched. A glass of red wine lingered in her fingers, and her gaze was fixed beyond the rain-streaked glass, lost in something no one else could see. She looked composed. Beautifully so. But more than that, she looked unreadable. His first instinct, she didn't want to be approached. His second, he didn't particularly care. Julian stood, moved closer without a word, and gestured to the empty seat beside her. She looked up, offered a neutral expression, and gave the smallest nod. An unspoken agreement that conversation, if done right, might just be welcome. He sat beside her. Their chairs weren't touching, but the space between them felt like it carried weight. He noticed how still she was, how controlled, like someone who knew how to carry silence as armor. They started with something light, a casual comment about the rain. She teased him for making it sound poetic, and he admitted he might just be entering his poetic era. She smirked at that. A quiet smirk, but it reached her eyes. She introduced herself as Noelle, and her name, he thought, sounded like it held secrets. Not the dangerous kind, the kind you want to learn slowly, one layer at a time. He told her his name too, Julian, and she repeated it softly, like tasting it was part of deciding whether to let the conversation continue. What followed wasn't small talk. It was something else. They spoke of drifting, of how sometimes being stranded is less about being stuck and more about being released. From schedules, from expectations, from everything but the moment in front of you. She told him she liked observing people, but from a certain distance. She said it with a smile, but the way her voice softened told him the distance wasn't just preference, it was practice. He didn't press. Instead, he noticed. Her wine hadn't moved. Her body was turned slightly away, but not fully, like she was undecided about what kind of company he would be. Her phone stayed flipped over the entire time. She asked him what he saw, what he noticed about her. So he told her, gently, that she wasn't drinking just to pass time, that she wasn't hiding from a flight, maybe from someone, that she carried her silence the way some people carry perfume, intentionally. She didn't argue, just listened. And when she finally spoke again, it was with the kind of honesty reserved for strangers we don't expect to see again. "I like this," she said quietly. "This space. It feels like nothing's being asked of me right now." He nodded, told her he wouldn't ask anything. Not yet. But even as he said it, something in him leaned forward. Not physically, not yet, just emotionally. That subtle shift when connection starts speaking louder than caution. He offered her something more than words. A possibility. What if they didn't wait for the flight? What if they didn't let a loudspeaker or boarding call decide the shape of their night? She tilted her head, considering. Where would we go? He told her he had passed a boutique hotel on the way here. Nothing flashy, just warm. Quiet. Fireplace in the lobby. They served wine until 2. She watched him carefully, like she was reading between the lines of what he wasn't saying. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "And if I say yes, this is just a conversation?" "If that's what you want," he said, "then that's exactly what it'll be. If it becomes something else, we'll both know it wasn't planned, just inevitable." She stood slowly, not breaking eye contact, finished her wine in one elegant motion, then picked up her bag. "You have a calm way of being bold," she told him. "It's unsettling, but in the best way." He smiled, picked up his bag, too, and, without another word, they walked side by side toward the terminal exit. Gate 47 faded behind them. No shared past, no guarantee of a tomorrow. Just a night beginning to write its own story. One breath, one look, one choice at a time. Chapter 2. A Room Without Rules. The drive was quiet. Not in an awkward way, but in that rare magnetic silence that only happens when two people are thinking the same thing and pretending not to. Rain tapped gently against the windshield, the soft hum of the tires on wet pavement adding rhythm to the stillness. Noelle sat with one leg folded under her, her gaze turned toward the window, but her attention somewhere else entirely. Julian noticed the way her fingers played with the edge of her coat sleeve. Not nervously, intuitively, like her body was slowly processing what her mind already knew. They pulled into the small circular drive of the hotel, soft amber lights glowing from behind heavy curtains, the kind of place designed to hush the world. No sliding glass doors, no rush. Just a solid wooden entrance and the echo of stillness behind it. Inside, the fireplace crackled in the corner of the lobby. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and rain. A woman at the front desk looked up, smiled, and offered a key card without question. Julian didn't hesitate when she asked, "One room?" He simply said, "Yes," with the kind of confidence that left Noelle more intrigued than alarmed. She didn't speak until the elevator doors closed behind them. He pressed the button for the 3rd floor, and she leaned against the mirrored wall beside him, eyes still on him, tone casual. "This isn't something you do often, is it?" Julian looked at her, really looked, and replied, "No. But that doesn't mean I haven't thought about a night like this more times than I can count." Her lips curved slightly, as if to say, "Good answer." The room was dim and calm. A single lamp in the corner cast a warm halo over the space. One bed, a plush armchair near the window, curtains half drawn over the storm still muttering outside. Noelle dropped her bag near the door and walked slowly toward the chair, dragging her fingers along the window ledge. She didn't sit. She stood in front of the glass, back half turned to him, her silhouette framed in reflection. "You sure you're not just a really good actor?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Julian set his phone on the nightstand and sat at the edge of the bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. His voice matched hers in softness. "Number I just know how to be honest when there's nothing to lose." Noelle turned slightly, arms crossed now. There was something flirtatious in her posture, but it wasn't performative. It was natural, subtle, like she was daring him to keep up with her without ever saying it aloud. "Do you think people can really connect in one night?" she asked. "I think people can feel seen in seconds," he replied. "Whether that turns into connection depends on whether they stop pretending." She stepped away from the window then, barefoot now, her shoes kicked off by the door without ceremony. The carpet cushioned her steps. The space between them shrank. "Have I been pretending?" she asked. Julian didn't move. "No," he said, "but I think you're used to people expecting you to." That caught her off guard, just for a moment, but instead of retreating, she smiled. "You really do pay attention." "I told you I did." Silence wrapped around them again, but it wasn't empty. It was loaded. She sat beside him, not close enough to touch, but close enough that their shoulders almost aligned. "If you were writing this night," she asked quietly, "how would you end it?" Julian glanced at her, then looked ahead. "I wouldn't," he said. "I'd leave it open. Let it become whatever it needs to be. No rules, no roles, just two people making it up as they go." Her fingers brushed the edge of the bedspread, lightly. "No roles," she repeated. "What if I told you I like roles?" Julian smiled at that. "Then I'd ask what character you want to play." She tilted her head, thoughtful, playful. "I'm not sure yet, but I like the idea of exploring that." He met her eyes. "Then we explore it together." They didn't move right away, didn't rush toward the heat. Instead, they let the moment stretch, let the space between their thoughts fill with imagination, with questions neither needed to answer just yet. There was no urgency, no agenda, just curiosity and desire wrapped in restraint. When she finally leaned her head against his shoulder, he didn't say a word. He just adjusted naturally, allowing her to settle in. It wasn't about claiming each other. Not yet. It was about being exactly where they were, in a room without rules, on a night that didn't ask for permission. And in that stillness, something deeper than lust began to unfold. Chapter 3. The Unscripted Game. The room was quiet, but not still. Outside the window, rain continued its quiet rhythm, a soft percussion behind glass. Inside, the air had thickened, not with tension, but with curiosity. It was the kind of silence that didn't beg to be broken. It simply waited for one of them to choose the next move. Julian had changed. Not completely, just enough to signal ease. Jacket off, sleeves rolled. He moved like a man aware of his presence, but unwilling to use it recklessly. Noelle had done the same. Her sweater now folded over the armchair, her frame tucked beneath a soft gray throw as she sat curled up on the bed, knees drawn beneath her. She looked comfortable, but far from asleep. The television wasn't on. There was no music playing, just the hum of possibility between them. "I've never done this," she said, her voice somewhere between thoughtful and daring. "Neither have I," he replied. "Not like this." She watched him from the corner of her eye, the side of her mouth curving into a quiet grin. "Then how would we even begin?" Julian leaned back against the headboard, one arm resting loosely behind his head. "We start with truth, then build the fiction around it." She considered that. "You want to role-play based on something real?" "I want to explore," he said, "but not just anything. I want to find out what's been living in your mind, and give it room to breathe." Noelle exhaled slowly, not out of hesitation, but intrigue. She liked the idea, not of pretending, but of revealing through invention, of using characters not to hide, but to speak more freely than her real voice would allow. "I've always imagined being watched," she admitted softly. "Not in a vulnerable way. More like someone seeing me clearly while I still get to play." Julian didn't move. "That's not a fantasy," he said. "That's a language." "And what about you?" she asked. "What would you be in this unscripted game?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more certain. I'd be the one who sees through you and makes you feel safe enough to drop the act when you're ready. Her breath hitched slightly, just enough for him to notice. So we don't name the characters, she said. We just become them. Exactly. The game, if it could be called that, unfolded slowly. There was no announcement, no shift in lighting or mood, only presence. A deep mutual awareness that they were no longer pretending to be strangers. Julian stood and walked toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to reveal the city below. Lights blurred through rain. He doesn't speak first, he said, as if narrating a scene. She's been watching him for a while. She thinks she's the one in control. Noelle adjusted herself slightly, one foot grazing the floor now. She knows he sees her, but she also knows he hasn't moved because he's waiting to see if she'll make the first demand. He turned, met her eyes. There was heat there, yes, but also care, deep focus. She doesn't need to speak, he continued. She just leans back, lets her silence become the invitation. And he takes it? She asked. No, Julian said. He waits, because part of the tension is in denying his own need to move. Noelle bit her lip, caught in the edges of her own imagination now. The game wasn't scripted. It wasn't physical. It was emotional chess, one heartbeat at a time. She finally speaks, she whispered. She says, "Come closer, but don't touch me yet." Julian stepped forward just a few paces, not to touch, but to see her more clearly. He listens, he said, because this is not about conquest. It's about being invited in. The energy between them shifted again. Noelle let her legs uncurl, letting the throw fall slightly. Her voice was steady now, clear and direct. She wants him to take control, but not by force. By knowing what? He asked. She leaned forward, her tone dropping to a hush. Knowing what she needs before she admits it. Julian's eyes didn't leave hers. Then he asks for one thing, he said. A word. Not for safety, for surrender. Something that tells him she's still with him, even in the edge of play. Noelle thought for a long moment. Velvet, she said. Julian smiled. Then that's what he gives her. Nothing sharp, nothing rushed, just velvet tension. She nodded slowly. Now it's your move. But he didn't move. He simply stood there, watching her in stillness, letting his presence press against her imagination like gravity. She could feel him even before he reached her. And when he finally did, it wasn't to touch her. It was to sit, slowly, beside her on the bed. Close enough that his warmth reached her skin. Still, he waited. And she smiled, because in that moment she realized the most powerful thing a man could give her wasn't touch. It was restraint. Chapter 4. When the Game Became Real. Morning came slowly. Not with blinding light, but with a subtle softening of shadows. The kind of morning that made no demands, that asked nothing of time, or people, or promises. It simply arrived, and lingered. The rain had stopped. The city outside was quiet again, holding its breath before waking. But inside the hotel room, there was no rush to match its rhythm. Noelle lay still beneath the blanket, half wrapped in warmth, her eyes already open but unfocused. She wasn't dreaming. She was remembering. Not because anything happened in the way people usually mean, but because something had shifted. She hadn't touched him. Not truly. And yet, she felt as if every part of her had been held. Julian sat in the armchair near the window, legs crossed, a hotel coffee cup resting in his hands. He hadn't spoken yet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because, for once, silence felt complete. There was something sacred about the space between them now, something earned. They had spent most of the night like that, close, present, entirely awake. At some point, Noelle had whispered something about feeling safe. She hadn't meant it as a confession. It just fell out of her. He hadn't answered with words. He'd just reached over and gently brushed her hair behind her ear. Not as a move, but as a moment. And then he'd let her curl against him. Let her fall asleep on his chest without asking what it meant. Now, in the golden quiet of morning, she spoke first. "Did we break the rules last night?" Julian didn't look at her. He smiled softly and sipped the coffee. "We didn't make any rules," he said. "We just stopped needing them." She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her like a robe. Her hair was slightly tousled, and there was no performance left in her movements. Just presence. "I thought it was going to be a game," she said, but it felt more like surrender. He finally turned to her. "Because it was," he said, "but not the kind that means giving up, the kind that means letting go." She studied him, the quiet steadiness in his posture, the way he didn't try to fill the room with words. "I think I've been pretending I didn't want to be seen," she said. "But maybe I just didn't think anyone could handle what they saw." Julian's reply was calm. "You don't need to shrink to be desirable, Noelle." That made her pause, then smile, and then, unexpectedly, laugh. The kind of laugh that didn't rise from the surface but from some warm, cracked-open place inside her. He laughed too, softly, letting the weight lift between them. It was strange, she thought, how easy this could have become something else. A physical detour, a distraction, another almost memory. But it didn't, because they didn't need it to. What they had was something quieter, deeper. It wasn't about claiming each other. It was about recognizing something in one another and holding space for it. They didn't say goodbye right away. They stayed in that room for a while, talking about places they'd never been, books they'd started but never finished, how some silences are heavier than words and others feel like exhaling. When it was finally time to leave, neither one asked what would come next, because sometimes the most powerful connections don't demand a future. They just change the present so deeply. You never walk back into the world quite the same.